I will now call to order the Monday, January 9th, 2012 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of you that are here at Carnegie Town Hall, those that are watching us on CityLink, and those that are watching us on siouxfalls.org. We'll begin today's meeting with a staff report by Interim City Clerk Sue Roust. Sue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we're into 2012, we're beginning initial preparations for the 2012 elections. And just to let you know what we've been doing, last week all of the staff from the clerk's office met with Bev Chase from the Sioux Falls School District to begin discussing plans for the April 10th election. The school district will vote tonight on whether to combine with the city on April 10th, and I anticipate that they will choose to do so. We have been working on drafting a new cost-sharing agreement between the city and the school district. It's been reviewed by staff in my office, by the city clerk, and by the purchasing department, and I will plan to bring it to council for approval at your February 6th meeting. I discussed with Dave Feifley and Scott Rust whether it should be approved by the mayor and placed on the consent agenda as other contracts have been done. But since this relates specifically to the election responsibilities and the budget of the city clerk's office, we felt it was more appropriate to bring it before the council. There's also an agreement to use the Sioux Falls School District's laptop computers and computer techs for a potential runoff election. Assuming that we do end up using voting centers and e-poll books, we will be using the school district's technical equipment, and they have graciously offered to provide the same support for a potential May 1st runoff. The election calendar and our current precinct and council district map have been placed on the website. We now have a 2012 election link there. Tomorrow we will add the trifold pamphlet that I showed you a couple of weeks ago. We've been waiting to put that up until we had a determination of what night council intended to be meeting. But other than that, it's ready to go. And we are just completing some updates on the campaign finance and general information book on the election, and we anticipate that will be on the website by the end of this week. Just a couple notes on tonight's agenda. Item 13, we have received a request from Mark Cotter at noon today to withdraw that item, and Mr. Cotter will be present tonight to explain his request to you. We also were notified at noon today that on item 14, the applicant has withdrawn their petition indefinitely, and so we will be asking you to remove that item from the agenda. And one last note, the legislative session begins tomorrow. I will be watching the bills and informing you of any related to your legislative priorities and the progress they're making through the legislative session.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Roust? If not, thanks. We'll now ask for a report on the Fiscal Committee meeting held Tuesday, January 3rd. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Councilor Aguilar. Last week we had a presentation by Joyce Molninsky. She's the director of the South Dakota Budget and Policy Project. It was about engaging citizens in fiscal policy decision-making. Largely it dealt with what goes on in the state government, but we had asked her to attend and hopefully to generate some ideas and things that we could look at in presenting the city budget and making it more engaging for citizens. Which led to a discussion afterwards. I was too quick on the gavel, so I need to apologize to Councilor Jameson because he wanted us to discuss going forward. We will be in budget season before too long, and how we want to present and see what things we can do to improve that budget process. So on February, our agenda, I will add that to our agenda, Tamara, to look at the budget presentation format and what we can do for improvement there. And that also got me to wondering about, with the charter revision meeting last week, there was talk about, and it did fail, but moving the CIP from what the charter says from July to August 1st, so everything could be presented, the entire budget, CIP and general budget, presented at one time. I'm wondering if that failed, but is there interest by the administration in moving the general budget back to July so you could present both the CIP and the general budget in July to the council in one presentation?
You're looking at me, Counselor, so I'm assuming you're looking for a response today on that. We'd certainly be willing to give that some thought. I know that does certainly constrain the timeline on the other end, or on the front end of the process. So that would certainly be an issue we'd have to resolve. We've been working through our budget calendar already, kind of planning things out, planning out the process for this year's budget process. But I'd certainly be willing to give that some thought.
I've always thought it was odd how that was structured, to have the two different budgets presented at different times. So maybe that's an item we could discuss at our February meeting and see if there's a long-term solution there. We'll add that to our February agenda as well, Councilor Aguilar and Tamara. Thank you.
Any questions for Councilor Brown? If not, thank you. We'll now go on to City Council open discussion. Anyone have anything to bring forward? If not, we'll go on to our presentations, and today we have an Event Center update, and I see Director Turbeck coming up to the podium.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turbeck with the Finance Office. I am here to kick off the presentation. You'll be hearing from all of the directors that are on the lead positions on the Event Center project, as well as Mayor Huther will wrap up the presentation. There's a lot of work going on, and so we're going to cover a lot of ground, although it will be a relatively brief presentation. I know you've got a hard schedule that you're working on today, so we'll certainly be respectful of your time as well. My segment on the presentation, as you might guess, has to do with the status update on the project financing, and particularly the bond sale. A lot of work has been done over the last couple of months, working toward an eventual sale of bonds to finance the project. The preliminary official statement is nearly complete. This is the primary marketing document that rating agencies and potential underwriters will look at to formulate their perception on the project and the financing and the bonds. It kind of tells the story of the bond issue, and tells about the City of Sioux Falls, the project itself, the Event Center project, how the money will be used, what other sources of funding there may be for the project, the bonds, the security, the source of repayment for those bonds. So it really tells a potential investor everything they should really need to know about the project and the bonds that they may ultimately be investing in. So that preliminary official statement, as I say, is nearly complete. We expect it will be, in conjunction with some of the other bullet points on the slide, it will be in a final form or final preliminary form fairly soon. Key to that is the bond rating. We have been working through the bond rating process, and you may recall on past bond issues, the city has obtained ratings from Moody's Investor Services, and you may also recall it was mentioned to you previously that because of the size of this bond issue, our financial advisor has recommended getting a second rating as well from Standard & Poor's. We did late last week receive the final rating from Moody's. They did assign a AA2 rating to these bonds and reaffirmed their AA2 rating on all of the city's outstanding sales tax bonds. So that's consistent with the bond rating that the city has had in the past from Moody's. We are still waiting for the final rating decision from S&P, although I can say I expect it to be in that high investment grade or AA range. They have, as Moody's does, they have several tiers within their high investment grade or AA category. But I do expect it to fall within that range. It could be anywhere from a AA. They use a little bit different scale. Theirs is a AA plus, AA, and a AA minus. So it will be one of those three ratings, I would expect. But we should get a final rating decision from Standard & Poor's in the very near future. An additional issue, and this ties back to the finalizing the preliminary official statement, and that is on the bonding structure. We are working through a number of issues relative to the private activity because there will be businesses operating in this facility. Some of the sports teams, management company will be operating here. Food and beverage businesses will be, or a business will be operating in the facility. So that raises a number of issues that we have to work through in conjunction with our bond counsel to identify the level or the degree to which the private activity will be occurring in there. And so that's a very deliberate process that we have to work through and identify and try to project as best we can the amount of financial activity that's associated with private activity in the facility. And that ties back to the structure of the bonds that will be issued, to what extent, if any, we will have to issue taxable bonds versus tax-exempt bonds and that kind of thing. We're also analyzing several different scenarios in conjunction or in cooperation with our financial advisor, all geared toward trying to minimize the interest cost on the bonds. And that could be altering maturity schedules, trying to structure it so that we get maturities structured in a way to take advantage of the differing interest rates at different maturity levels or different maturities as well. So all of those things are being analyzed thoroughly, trying to anticipate every possible alternative that the city has as we move forward in financing this project. Again, all geared toward trying to get the lowest overall interest costs that we possibly can. The timing of the bond sale is maybe of a great deal of interest to you folks. The bonds have not been sold, obviously. We have not set a bond sale date as yet. As you know, we are anticipating these bonds to be sold on a competitive basis. And so in advance of that sale date, we will be publicizing a notice of sale and making announcements that when those bonds will be sold. We're currently still anticipating that to occur in January. Although there may be reasons why we would want to consider moving that to February, and we'll certainly take that as it comes and be very deliberative in that process and in making that decision. Again, if we do decide to sell the bonds in January, or excuse me, in February rather than January, that will be driven by our intent to, again, minimize interest costs and try to get the best possible funding structure that we can for the project. The last bullet point on there is investment opportunity. We are getting quite a few calls from individuals in the community and from around the state who are interested in possibly buying some of these bonds, looking at this as a possible investment opportunity. Of course, as I mentioned, these are going to be sold on a competitive basis, so we won't know who the underwriter will be until the day the bonds are actually sold. The underwriter will be selected strictly based on cost and the overall lowest interest costs that we can get on the entire financing. So the underwriter will then resell the bonds to the ultimate investors. Now, typically on a large bond issue like this, they may have one or two or a very small number of very large investors lined up that they can turn around and resell to immediately, and then if that's the case, and that's very likely to happen, there will not be bonds that will become available immediately to local or any individual investors on a small basis. So it's important for people to understand that. However, I've been recommending to those that are calling and inquiring and expressing an interest that they simply let their investment advisor, their broker or banker, or whoever they would normally deal with in handling their investments, if those folks would just let their investment advisors know that they're interested, so that in the event that some of these bonds do become available, that their advisors are aware of that and can assist them in making that transaction. So that's important for people to know. And of course, that process works toward, again, the overall goal of achieving the lowest interest cost to the city. Any other structure, a negotiated sale, that kind of thing, might give us some other flexibilities on that. But in the end, I think the expectation is that would cost the city more in interest in the long run. So that's the reason this method of sale has been selected. With that, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Cooper, and Mike will talk about the selection process for the management company. Thank you.
Good afternoon, City Council members. Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. One of the many steps that we are working on with this event center journey is to end up with a management company that would be in charge of managing not only the new event center, but also the existing arena and existing convention center. This is going to be kind of a two-step process. The first step is going to be to hire an expert that can help us work through that selection process and negotiating a contract to hire a management company. So as we've done this, as we started this step, we did an RFP that went out to the community on November 25th, asking for proposals for this expertise. Those proposals were due back to us by December 15th. We did receive 4 proposals that we looked at, and we put together a selection committee that included representatives of not only the city attorney's office, which was Karen Leonard, also Darren Smith with community development, Tracy Turback with finance, myself with planning. We initially had Councilmember Karski involved with this, and then we turned that over to Councilmember Aguilar to help us. So those are the 5 members of the selection committee that initially narrowed down the 4 proposals to 2 that we thought would be worthy of conducting interviews. And the 2 firms that we interviewed included Crossroads Consulting Services out of Tampa, Florida, as well as Venue Solutions out of Nashville, Tennessee, and they were teamed up with CS&L based out of Minneapolis. The other 2 firms that we did not decide to interview were from Manhattan Beach, California, and Chicago, Illinois. So we felt that we started out with 2 really good proposals to interview. We conducted those interviews recently, and the group has recommended that the contract should be awarded to Crossroads Consulting Services, again out of Tampa, Florida. The services that they would be providing for us include, first of all, reviewing the current management structure of both the arena and convention center. They'll be looking at a lot of the historical data, including financials, revenue, expenses, and again, looking at all the information that we've accumulated as far as any performance evaluations of those 2 facilities. A second aspect of their services would include outlining both advantages and disadvantages of different alternative management structures. And this is something that we heard from during the interview, which is kind of interesting because not only are we going to be hiring a firm to handle the day-to-day operations of those buildings and also conduct bookings, but also what's the best way to structure things like ticketing, as well as food and beverage concessions. There's different approaches within the industry that we could look at, and again, Crossroads would be analyzing those different options or different alternatives and giving us some recommendations on advantages and disadvantages. Then they would be looking at ways to improve the efficiency, the productivity, and the quality of the operation, as well as looking at ways that we can improve our financial performance with this new proposed management structure. They would assist in the selection process by helping put together a request for proposal for a management entity, again, for the event center complex, which would include the arena and convention center. We currently are looking at including the Orpheum because SMG does manage that facility, but the Orpheum may come in as a part of the package or as a spin-off entity. So again, we're going to be taking a look at the best way to handle that facility as well. And then finally, the big task will be assisting us once we've made a selection of negotiating the contract with a new management company. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to have an outside company come in, because we don't have the internal expertise to do this. Although we have negotiated contracts in the past, we believe that with the scope and the complexity of this one, that we need some expertise, and of course that contract would ultimately be coming to the City Council for final approval. The proposal from Crossroads included a fee not to exceed $40,000, which would include at least 4 trips to Sioux Falls, although that's subject to further negotiation. The funding for the $40,000 is included in this year's budget, operating budget in the finance office. That was a line item that was approved in the budget from finance. And this, by the way, was the lowest cost of the proposals that we did look at. So not only do we think we have the strongest expertise, but we have the one that's the most economical. The target to complete all the tasks initially in the RFP was the end of May, that we wanted to have a contract negotiated. And during the interviews, we said, could we speed that up by at least 30 days? And both of the firms that we interviewed said that was very feasible, very possible. So now we're looking at a target to complete all the tasks of having a new management entity, a new management agreement negotiated by the end of April or by April. So that's the timeline that we're on right now. And again, we're very pleased with the two firms that we did discuss, did interview. They both were very much saying that our process is transparent. Of course, they were both looking for a job from us, but they both had very good things to say about the process. And it was interesting to see how much they were tracking the event center election and the process that we went through in terms of providing these monthly updates. So again, we're very pleased. We feel confident that Crossroads Consulting Services is going to do a good job for the city and that they can meet our timeline of finalizing this by April of 2012. So the next presentation, I believe, will be from Mark Cotter.
Good afternoon, council members. I've got about 4 slides that I'll provide you an update on the current design and construction schedule for the event center. First slide really talks to, we've had a kickoff meeting. Just recently we got not only the design team, Sink Homes Deflifts, along with Coke Hazard and Mortensen Construction, but also Tegra, our owner's rep. They're essentially an extension of the city staff, along with the city staff in a room, and really talk through the processes that we'll take to really deliver a strong project. One of the keys, the slide that you were shown in the last monthly update by Mayor Huther, was the project organization. And we talked in depth about that in the tree of design and construction. And so really trying to identify the roles of each team member and their responsibilities so there's clear communication on who does what. For example, Mortensen will bring 3 people to that meeting, but we want to know who is our point person. So as we get to a point when there'll be 50 and 60 emails a day on this project, we want to make sure that there's clear communication and good management of all the tasks. We discussed project schedule. One of the key things that we identified in the notice to proceed is that they have to work closely with the design team and identify and produce a project schedule by the end of January. So by the next monthly update, if we've fleshed out the entire schedule, we'll be able to share that with you. And then last key was project processes. Again, what are the communication channels? One of the key things is that these consultants do want to be paid, and so there's a very rigid financial submission of when their invoices are due and what our internal review processes will be, and then what day they'll actually be paid. So that schedule was provided. And then we also talked at great length about the community input process, how we'll get through those respective decisions, and I have some slides on that coming up. Next slide. All right, a project of this size has to have a series of committees to essentially segment out the work and also continue to communicate. So I want to just provide a short definition of the respective committees that are on the team. First one that's identified is the core project team. That is of the organizational structure that you've seen back in December. That's Mayor Huther. Project manager is Kendra Simmonsma, and then the 5 leads for each of those areas. The steering committee is really a committee that's made up of our entire design and construction team, which is our hired consultants along with Tegra. And then we get into the point where we've reached out to the community for community involvement. We've had an application on the website that they can submit. We've been fortunate to receive just over 50 of those, of people that have asked to either be on the facility management tenant committee or the design detail committee. The goal is to have about 10 people on each of those committees so we can get some good relevant feedback to our entire steering committee team and really vet through the various decisions that will be made over the course of the next 30 months. There's the design overview committee that we really want to reach out to the local business executives that have undertaken large building construction so we can bring them along about every 8 weeks in this process, find out some of the things that they learned through their large building projects and what we can learn. And so that's a committee that we've identified to enlist. And then we want to certainly keep you current on the project, which is continue to do these monthly updates. But we also are identifying slots on the various committees, and then we'd like to work with council leadership to fill those respective slots. And so on the city website for the applications, we've given the community through the 15th of this month to submit for one of the committees. And then once we get all those in, we'll vet through them and then start to work with council leadership on the city council slots. And then last, public open houses. It's our intent at this point to make sure that the community stays engaged and can engage the design team at about every 8 to 10 weeks. We would expect to do a public open house on this project at various locations throughout the community. Next slide. One of the first public meetings that you'll see is really going to be geared to the contractors. There's a lot of work that will start to happen on the design side, but we want to make sure that the local contractors are well informed on how this project will ultimately get carried out. And so Mortensen, right now we've tentatively set February 15th as a open house for them to come and not only talk about the type, size of the project, but also what they expect the overall schedule to be, when they expect certain schedules of work to be bid, and ultimately how they will be bid. Back when Jim Wiederick provided you an overview of the contracts and how they can actually either bid the projects or go best value, we've got both those options available to us per state law. And just to kind of re-give you those terminologies, the typical approach that we see in Sioux Falls and South Dakota is the design, bid, build, where you truly do complete the design and then you bid the project, open book, and then you build it. There's another way that's allowed by state law where you really can manage your risk. You're really going for cost is a factor, but it's not the only factor like it is in the first option. And you're really hiring contractors based on their performance, their approach, the people that are on their team, their understanding of the local market. And ultimately, you get a better project because you've got some of these just large schedules of these buildings like mechanical, electrical, plumbing that really have been successful if you use the best value. So as this public meeting comes up and as we talk more about that, we'll have Mortensen Construction come and brief you on those as well. Next slide. And last slide I have is just one of the first reports that we've asked for is in. It just came in on Friday, so we haven't had a chance to vet through it, but the soil investigation, the red lines are the contours of the rock that's in that area. We're seeing rock that varies about 6 to 42 feet in that area, and so we'll now take that report, we'll share it with the design and the construction team, and again, that's one of the critical reports that they need to make sure that they can design an efficient foundation system. So just wanted to give you an update. That's one of the items that we updated you in December that was underway and that report's in. So that's my update for you. Next is Director Darren Smith.
Good afternoon, Darren Smith, Director of Community Development. This is my one and only slide, so I'll be brief. Since the Event Center vote passed in November, we've had a number of inquiries from local organizations and individuals inquiring about naming rights, sponsorship opportunities, and suites primarily. So in an effort to respond to those inquiries and get some information out there for those folks, we decided the best way to approach that would be to launch a new web page, which we will do this month. And we talked about this a little bit last month. Mayor Huther did in the monthly Event Center update at that time. We'll launch a web page. It'll be on the city's Event Center website, and it'll include information on the 3 facilities that are out there and will be out there. So the arena, the existing arena, the convention center, and the new event center. And the reason we say information on all 3 is because we do believe that there are potential naming rights and sponsorship opportunities for all 3 facilities, not just a new event center, or even perhaps a naming rights and sponsorship opportunities for the complex, as Mike Cooper alluded to, again, being those 3 physically connected facilities. So it'll include information on the buildings. It'll include a copy of the superlative report from last summer, which goes into some detail with the analysis that was done. And then also it'll have an interest form, a very simple 1-page form that, again, organizations and individuals can complete, submit back to us, and tell us what area or areas they're interested in. Again, whether it be title sponsor naming rights, premium sponsorship opportunities, or suites or other premium seating. So again, that will launch later this month. Secondly, another item that Mayor Huther touched on last month with the monthly update, the development of an event center area master plan. And that is something that the planning department and community development departments will be working together on, not only to develop the plan, but then ultimately to implement and execute the plan successfully long term. We had our first meeting last month internally, and that process is continuing this month now, and it will going forward with meetings with developers and investors. In fact, we had 3 such meetings just this afternoon, so it's very fresh for us today. And we're learning lots, getting lots of good feedback. To give you an idea of what this area will look like, the boundaries, I think, are going to be probably something just south of the event center area, maybe a couple blocks south of the event center area, north to 60th Street, west to I-29, and east to Minnesota Avenue. We think it's important to, if we're going to undertake this effort and this process, to look at the larger area because of what's happening with the new and rapidly developing Sanford Sports Complex area. Also with the airport, the changes they're making and changes that we know will be coming or could be coming for that area. And then again, all along Russell, as you know, which is going to 6 lanes here in a couple years. So we think it's a nice opportunity to look at the whole area and put something on paper that developers, investors, and others can hopefully be guided by in the future as we work with them to see that area develop successfully. Thank you. I think Mayor Huther is next, I believe.
Well, team, I want to thank you again for this opportunity. You cannot imagine the number of hours and the number of meetings and the amount of time and effort that's going into this. But we were asked by council leadership to keep this particular meeting a bit briefer. So we're going to do that. However, I want to kind of set you up a little bit for some of the meetings yet to come. Because, as the slide says, there is so much going on, there is so much more to tell, and we're dang excited about what's happening. I want to give you a little flavor. First of all, in the future, we want to try to begin to compare and contrast other regional facilities. And I'm actually going to give you a little homework with your permission. And I'd ask the people of Sioux Falls to do this same thing that I'm going to ask all of you. There's a particular facility in Winnipeg, Canada. It's called the Mts Center. This is a center that was actually designed by Don Detlefs and the St. Combs Detlefs team. It is a center that will have a lot of features to it that we will have in our new event center here as well. So I think it would give you a good understanding of what it is that our new event center may have in the future. So if you have the opportunity, just Google Mts Center in Winnipeg, and you'll get a good flavor for what ours could potentially look like. As we're talking in all of these meetings with these professionals, and as they're trying to educate all of us that are not professionals at designing or building event centers, we're hearing key words, key phrases, and I wanted to share some of those with you, again, just to try to lay a foundation for some of the things that we're going to tackle in the future, as well as some of the goals that we will have as a team as we build our new event center. Two of the words that come up are enduring architecture. We have tried to relay that we don't want to be too trendy with our new event center, that this is one thing that we've heard from you and one thing that we've heard from the people of Sioux Falls, that this is a 50, a 60, a 70-year investment, and that we want it to endure the test of time. So whether it be the colors, whether it be the schematic design, whether it be the ins and outs of this facility, we want it to endure. And that is one of the goals that we will have as a team, as well as we break out some of these subgroups, we're going to ask them to have it endure the test of time as well. Steel, steel, and steel. I found that intriguing, but it came up in a big way in the meeting that Mark talked about. You can't imagine all of the materials that go into this new event center that this city is building. But they made it perfectly clear to all of us that there is one component that we better pay attention to the most, because it's going to impact the cost in such a big way, and that is steel. So, Sioux Falls, let's start to watch those steel prices. And that'll be one of the things that we'll be watching, as well as all these other things. But I think that Councilor Jameson said it best about a month ago. He said, you know, Mayor, what are you going to do to kind of control these expenses? And as we're digging into this more and more, components like steel are one of those things that ultimately the city of Sioux Falls won't control. But it is one of those things that will definitely impact the price of the project. Something else that we've heard is that functionality is key. This is a sports and entertainment complex. It is our goal is to hire a firm that will help us not only manage this, but also keep it incredibly busy for the people of Sioux Falls, for the people of this region, for the state of South Dakota to enjoy. So you got to be able to turn it over on a dime. So functionality is really important. And that's one of the things that we're working with our design consultant and our building teams to make sure that we can make sure that happens. Because we've said this time and time again, we're going to run this like a business. We have to. If there's one thing that I've heard from Councilor Brown, and he was so spot on, was that it's going to come down to the revenues. The revenues are key. The expense controls are key. We want to operate this thing in the black. So one of the things that we're going to look at as a team over the months and the years to come are those revenue-generating opportunities. And then something that I found intriguing, and I thought Councilor Jameson would find this intriguing too, is that, you know, we talk about a $115 million event center. Well, I wanted to tell you folks something. Actually, we're going to try to build a $113 million event center. And the reason being, what we've been told is that you want to, again, give yourself some leeway as things change in the months to come. So right now, our target is a $113 million event center. And so you're going to see the numbers kind of roll up to that, at least initially. And then we'll probably get closer, yes, Councilor Jameson, to that 115 as time goes by. Again, we're excited about this project. There's so much more that we want to tell you, but we also wanted to be cognizant of your time. And so we want to thank you for this opportunity. Our next event center meeting is on February 13th at 4 p.m. But if there are any questions, we'd love to try to answer those for you today. Councilor Chair Aguilar.
Council, any questions for the mayor or directors Turbach, Cooper, Cotter, or Smith? Well, I have just one.
Okay.
Well, I guess this is for Director Cotter. I know you said that you haven't had time to look at the report on the soils investigation very thoroughly, but preliminarily, were you surprised by anything you've seen or anything that gives you heartburn already?
You know, I think one of the things that I told the mayor early on is that, you know, the biggest unknown is what lies below, and so now we know what lies below, and we're going to sit down with Mortensen and Sincombs and really work through what the foundation system will be. So at this point, I'm not surprised. I'm glad we've got the report basically a week after the design and construction kickoff, and I'll give you a much better opinion next month. How's that? Yeah, and there is no oil, so. Yeah. We're not in North Dakota, so.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Councilor Karski.
I do have one, if I could, from Director Smith, please. Just curious on the naming rights and sponsorship and that type of thing. People, a lot of speculation out in the community. Whose name, what, and that type of thing. When are we anticipating we're going to have names and numbers for people to know about?
Yeah, good question. I think the way we see the process unfolding, again, step one, we know there's a great deal of interest. We've certainly seen evidence of that since early November. So we want to build this site, get information out there, be able to collect information from those interested, and that'll really help us gauge demand. And that impacts a number of things, design decisions and so forth going forward. But the key with this process and so many more in this project is going to be the hiring of the facility manager. In talking to a number of other facilities about naming rights as well as a number of other things, I know that has come up time and time again, and you'll probably hear me say that a number of times, but getting a facility manager hired and engaged in the process is very important, and I think we want to be very, very careful with any decisions we make with any of these areas without some level of input from them.
So we're going to be well past summer, most likely, by that time that happens?
Well, not necessarily. I think as Director Cooper outlined, the timeline for getting a facility manager selected and engaged could be as early as April or May. And then I think we would be able to hit the ground running very quickly. Certainly that's something that we would want to do. If you look at the timeline of when these buildings, the sponsorships are executed, premium seating sales, suites, loge boxes, loge seating, club seats, and so forth, it can go right up until the day that a facility opens, and it usually will take a lot of times the full length of time that a project is being constructed. So I think we're just fine time-wise, but certainly after we get a manager on board, we want to start executing that process as much as possible.
Councilor Rolfing.
And Councilor Karski, if I may, and I apologize, Councilor Chair Aguilar. One of the reasons we wanted to get the website going as well is that when Darren says there is a high demand, there already is a high demand. We've got a number of firms who would like their name on the outside of the building. I've got a number of firms who have expressed interest on being a major sponsor within the confines of the building, and we've got more firms than we ever expected that want a suite. In fact, they don't want just one suite, they want 2 suites. So we're trying to evaluate that because, as Darren stated, it does impact the design and the construction as well. So if you also remember, our original intent was to actually maybe even hire a firm to help us in this effort. And we're trying to evaluate that as well. Because, again, Darren, myself, the rest, we are not experts at doing this. But when the demand is as it is, maybe there is an opportunity for us to capture this opportunity on our own without hiring a third party to do that and then paying them what in some cases is they want 10% of the revenues, not just for 1 year. They want 10% for as many years as we cut the deal. So we're trying to evaluate that as well. So Councilor Karski, we will keep you updated. We're learning as you are, and I'm sorry we don't have the most succinct answers as you may like, but it is evolving. But I think it's a good problem to have, versus one of the things that we've learned is that in some cases you don't have the naming rights for maybe like a year and a half. Well, we're trying to actually, because of the demand, because we've been talking about this as a town for so long, my gut is saying we're not going to have to wait that long.
Councilor Rolfing.
Director Cooper? This has to do with some of the subject you were just talking about, and that is, aren't we under contract with our two management firms right now up until the end of the year, and how are we going to take care of that? And then I'll have a little something for you too, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, we do have agreements with both SMG and Global through the end of 2012. Once we select the firm that's going to manage the facility beyond 2012, we'll continue to work with both of those entities for the balance of the year. But there will be a transition process that we'll be working with both the company that does get selected as well as the one that does not get selected.
Okay.
And Mike, can you also let them know?
Go ahead, if you want.
And Councilor Rolfing, too, we've been in contact with both SMG and Global in a very, very proactive way, because we didn't want to catch them off guard either. And so we immediately, after the Event Center vote passed, one of the things that Mike did is he met with them to say, okay, folks, this is no secret. Start planning now, start getting your stuff together so that you are fully prepared when that competition begins. As well as, it's not just SMG and Global. If there's another firm out there that would like to apply for this opportunity, they certainly have that ability as well. And Mike, I don't know if that made any sense, what I just said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, a word of caution, if I may, and that is that you may feel that not hiring someone to come in and make the sales sounds for some of these things, because we've got such a demand right now, it looks real easy. Mr. Sullivan sits out there, and I can assure you from where I'm at and what I've done over my 37 years in the business, in some sales business, that it's the easy ones. It looks real easy. Picking the fruit off the bottom of the tree is easy. But filling up the basket, the top of the basket, is real hard to do. And so don't let that negate you going out and hiring somebody to take care of the rest of it, because you may find yourself on your face looking at that.
Councilor Rolfing, wholeheartedly respect everything you said. Elephant hunting is a lot different than shooting fish in a barrel, and that's what we called it where I came from anyway. Was elephant hunting. Putting the name on the outside of the building, that's a gigantic elephant, and we will certainly take your advice as it is meant, and we respect everything that you said. And that again is something that we're trying to evaluate as we go here. But I do think, though, that whether it is SMG or Global or some other firm, we would kind of like to help them have them help us navigate through these waters.
And that might be the right way to go, rather than with the firm that we hired before, whatever.
Thank you. Good advice.
Any other questions for the mayor or directors Turbeck, Cooper, Cotter, and Smith? If not, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, directors. Is there any other business to come before this body? If not, we will need 10 minutes before the Public Services Committee meeting, and so that will begin at 5 o'clock. This informational meeting is adjourned.